it takes time to build a new system. Blockchains are new systems, smart contract platforms are new systems, and it takes time to also build trust into those. And Ethereum showcasing that it stayed up for 10 years, that it went through 16 upgrades, and it still kept producing like new blocks every 12 seconds. It's just like a big paradigm shift that we now, or that the world now knows, hey, there's like a system out there that just keeps running like clockwork, that is reliable, that is decentralized. Stuff like this just takes time, right? It has to prove itself, and I think Ethereum has proven itself over the past 10 years.
Welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic. Today's show features a new report called Building the World Ledger by the team at growthepie. So given the 10-year anniversary of Ethereum going live, this is a report that I found really compelling to kind of tell the story of how Ethereum has evolved over the years. I think one of the takeaways from the report is that Ethereum has matured from this experimental blockchain into what is the backbone of DeFi or global on-chain finance. But there's a lot of numbers behind that. There's a great story to tell, and I think that Lorenz and Matze are awesome tour guides to help us better understand what does the data actually tell us about that journey.
We spend a lot of time diving into the layer 2 ecosystem, and is that scaling roadmap working? And ultimately, is it accruing value back to ETH, the asset?
You know what else was really timely is just there's been so much in the news around Circle launching an L1 and Stripe choosing to launch an L1. And so I think we drill down into, does it make sense? Why would you choose deploying an L2 over an L1? What are some of the advantages or disadvantages? And I think one more reason we wanted to have growthepie on the podcast is, there's a lot of attention on ETH, the asset. And while I'm very happy about that, I think it's also a great time to revisit what's working with Ethereum, why are fundamentals so strong, and what's next. So before we get started, just a quick reminder, you can subscribe at the-edge.xyz. That's the best place to stay up to date on all of our new posts through the Edge newsletter, but also get real-time notifications for the Edge podcast. You can also subscribe directly to the Edge podcast through like Apple or Spotify or YouTube. If you go to our link tree, it's just edge_pod. Otherwise, one final shout out to our sponsors. Thank you to the sponsors that make this show possible. All of the content that we make here through the newsletter and through the Edge podcast is always free. All you have to do on the newsletter is just submit an email. So everything is ungated. And if you go to our show notes, you'll find all of the awesome sponsors we have, folks like REDSTONE, Maple Finance, and so forth. So check them out, click on the links and learn more. And we hope you enjoy the show. Grow wealth exponentially. With TOROS leveraged tokens, when the market moves in your favor, your gains become parabolic. They're built to ride trends, auto-compounding profits. With TOROS, it's simple. Pick a vault, deposit, and your exposure is multiplied, maintained, and protected automatically against liquidations. TOROS reduces risk and keeps you in the market ready for the rebound. When markets dip, the vaults auto-adjust, softening losses and preserving your position. Just pick a token to multiply your returns. TOROS Finance, exponential gains with leveraged tokens. To learn more, go to toros.finance. REDSTONE is building the Oracle backbone to unlock real-world finance on-chain and next-gen DeFi. With modular gas-efficient feeds across over 110 chains, trusted by 170 clients, supporting over 1,300 assets, from value-accruing stablecoins, liquid staking and restaking tokens, to treasuries, private credit, and commodity tokens, REDSTONE delivers accurate real-time data where it matters most. The biggest platforms and protocols in DeFi today choose REDSTONE oracles, such as Athena, Securitize, BlackRock Biddle, Pendle, Spark, and Maple Finance. If you're building the future of finance on-chain, you need REDSTONE's leading modular blockchain oracle layer. To To learn more, go to redstone.finance. And thanks to Redstone for supporting us here at the Edge podcast and Edge newsletter. Maple Finance is one of my favorite products in DeFi. It is a gateway to sustainable real yield powered by over 1 billion in AUM across USDC and BTC products. And now with SYRUPUSDC by Maple, anyone can earn institutional grade yield. Learn more at syrup.fi, and thanks to Maple for supporting us here at the Edge podcast and Edge newsletter. FALCON Finance, the team behind the fastest growing synthetic dollar, with institutional yields that are competitive and sustainable, offering yield optimized across your favorite DeFi protocols. Point season is now live. Learn more at falcon.finance. All right, let's introduce the co-founder of growthepie, Matze, and lead researcher, Lorenz. Guys, welcome to the Edge podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks for having us, guys. Excited to talk Ethereum and data today.
So you just released an exciting report to commemorate 10 years of Ethereum being live. The name of the report is Building the World Ledger. And the thesis behind it is that after 10 years, Ethereum's vision is to become the world's most trusted and reliable ledger. It's not about the world's fastest computer. I love this. I think it's very timely. There's been a huge narrative shift in the Ethereum space. One of the reasons we wanted to have you on is just because you are digging through the data, because growthepie is an Ethereum ecosystem data analytics tool. So anyways, excited to have you as our tour guide today. So why don't we start with just more on growthepie? Could you share a bit more on what you guys do, and then we'll get into the report.
Yeah, sure. Would love to. So at growthepie, our main mission is basically to make Ethereum ecosystem data as transparent and as accessible as possible to as many users out there, but specifically for builders, people that want to build on Ethereum, build on layer 2s. We just want to help them make data-driven decisions, make better decisions. But a nice side effect is also just showcasing how well Ethereum is doing, because I think that's also a nice marketing side effect of making the Ethereum ecosystem transparent.
Guys, maybe we'll jump right into the report. Start off with, I think, kind of an easy one here. So Ethereum's known for its 10-year track record of no downtime. Just curious, how does that shape its reputation today?
It takes time to build a new system. Blockchains are new systems, smart contract platforms are new systems, and it takes time to also build trust into those. And Ethereum showcasing that it stayed up for 10 years, that it went through 16 upgrades, and it still kept producing new blocks every 12 seconds. It's just a big paradigm shift that we now, or that the world now knows, hey, there's a system out there that just keeps running like clockwork, that is reliable, that is decentralized. And yeah, stuff like this just takes time, right? It has to prove itself, and I think Ethereum has proven itself over the past 10 years, and it will also keep proving itself in the future.
So guys, something that you highlight in the piece is the importance of the Merge and Dencun. Maybe summarize at a high level what these events were and why they were such, I guess, in your minds, pivotal turning points in Ethereum's history.
Yeah, so the Merge and the Dencun upgrades are, in our opinion, one of the two most important upgrades Ethereum went through. I mean, in total, they went through 16 upgrades, but I think these two stand out because, first of all, the Merge, that was the transition from proof of work to proof of stake consensus algorithm for Ethereum. And that led to, first of all, a huge inflation reduction for ETH, the asset, but also it reduced the energy consumption of Ethereum by over 99.8%. And I think that is a huge accomplishment we often overlook. And then regarding the Dencun upgrade that has been out almost 1.5 years, that introduced data sharding. And what is data sharding? I think you can explain it like we have Ethereum who is mainly executing transactions, and that's one shard. And now with the Dencun upgrade, there was additional shard added, which is like running in parallel, you can think of it. And this data shard allows anyone to post blobs, which are basically just pieces of data, to this data shard. This data shard is like not executing any transactions. It's basically just storing the data that is being posted on it. And this allowed layer 2 rollups to use that space to post state differences and transaction receipts from the layer 2 state and really reduce the cost of settlement and data availability costs for these layer 2s to be able to provide cheap transaction costs for the users on their own execution environments. And these two upgrades, I think, are probably the biggest upgrades Ethereum went through and really paved the way for this layer 2 boom we have seen over the last 4 years.
Yeah, 100% agree. And like maybe just a small thing to add here, like all of the other upgrades were obviously also very important for like Ethereum. But like how I like to summarize it is kind of like the merge made Ethereum more sustainable, both economically through lower issuance as well as like ecologically, just like through way lower energy consumption. And then the Dencun upgrade introduced the rollup centric roadmap, right? It made Ethereum scalable through horizontal scaling via layer 2s, which is like a whole new like design space that opened up basically through it.
Can either of you explain some of the impact of Dencun in lowering transaction costs to the overall narrative around like ultrasound money with Ethereum? I feel like there was a buildup in excitement, of course, for transaction costs and that leading to higher burn. And, it was a bit of a rallying cry in the community, but, the goal is to scale for greater usage. The goal is for Ethereum to scale ultimately with the L2 roadmap. And yeah, it felt like a bump in the road, even though it was such an enormous accomplishment. So I'm just curious, like, what were your thoughts on that sort of contradiction of Dencun being a milestone, but then there actually being like a negative sentiment to follow that milestone?
So you're totally right. Yeah. There was a big controversy with the Dencun upgrades, and that has to do that layer 2s were now using this new data shard to post data really cheaply, rather than posting it as a call data input field in the execution shard. So they basically saved millions of settlement costs, which would have gone to Ethereum through transaction fees. So there was really a huge drop-off in demand for the execution environment, causing more ETH to be produced than burnt. And I think, that overshadowed a little bit this upgrade. But honestly, in my opinion, it is a necessary step. I mean, these upgrades are aimed to be running sustainable in 5 to 10 years. And I think, sure, in the first few years, there might be not enough demand to fill up the blob space capacity, causing these gas fees on the blob or the data shard to only be one way, which is basically free. But eventually, I think with new increased demand, this blob space will also fill up, and then the fees will increase and the value will flow back to Ethereum.
In the report, you call out that 75% of Ethereum users now interact only on L2s. So probably makes sense for us to get into, why do we need layer 2s? Even though Ethereum, I believe, has now plans to scale to like a higher TPS. Talk to us about that. Like, what's the nuance in that? And again, why do we need layer 2s?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's great to see also like Ethereum becoming more ambitious and wanting to scale. So right now, Ethereum mainnet is at like roughly 20 TPS, and plans are to scale it to 10,000 TPS, which will be a huge accomplishment. But in the meantime, we need layer 2s. Well, we will also need layer 2s after that. Layer 2s basically give us the chance to iterate quickly, to explore different use cases, to also market into lots of different markets. Like each layer 2 team is its own BD team for Ethereum in a sense. and they're all trying to onboard like a different crowd to Ethereum, to the Ethereum ecosystem. And so I think to me it makes sense, like a lot of sense, that like most users are now active on layer 2s. Maybe just like to the 75% that you had mentioned, just to explain that number better, what we looked at there is like within a given week, how many people interacted on Ethereum mainnet or on layer 2s. Only 25% of the addresses that interacted on layer 2s were also active on Ethereum mainnet in this given week, which I think also makes sense in the sense that like people do not have to use Ethereum mainnet as often, because Ethereum mainnet is supposed to be for high value transactions, or it's like mostly used these days for high value transactions. So it's where you store your bank accounts, where you store basically your investments. And layer 2s are more for like your day-to-day activity. It's where you buy NFTs. It's where you do things on like small games. It's where you maybe ape into some small DeFi stuff. And that's where you're just like more active. So you might be active on Ethereum mainnet once a quarter, honestly, maybe once a week if you're very active. But on layer 2s, you can be active every day. And also layer 2s just like have more diversity in terms of like apps and use cases to offer these days, and to explore, while Ethereum mainnet is, hey, safe DeFi, the world ledger, let's just like make sure that like your funds are safe, your funds earn your yield, but it's like not as explorative these days as like all these layer 2s are. But if things work out on layer 2s, then it's also cool to like maybe bring some of these use cases back to mainnet. That's also always an option, right?
Guys, one thing I would love for one of you to kind of walk us through. Can you derive a clean example of how L2 success translate directly to ETH, the asset value accrual? You know, I think everybody likes to call out, hey, look, the success of Base doesn't actually mean the success of ETH, the asset. You know, Base can generate whatever, hundreds of millions in sequencer fees, but ultimately, how does that trickle down to ETH asset holders? And yeah, just kind of walk us through what needs to happen for, I guess, L2s to not be extractive to Ethereum, but additive to Ethereum.
It is a very complex topic, but I think I can break it down as much as I can. So how does Base make money? Well, they take in execution fees on their own layer 2, and then they have to settle these transactions onto Ethereum. And what does settle mean? Well, first of all, because they are an optimistic rollup, they have to post the transaction receipt basically to the Ethereum data shard, which is the blobs, and then also prove or like open up the window for any entity to actually validate these transactions onto the execution environment of Ethereum Layer 1. So they basically have to post not only to the data shard, but also to the execution shard. And currently, they operate with a 95% profit margin because they take in so many fees, and the fees they pay to Ethereum in form of transaction costs is so low. So they make a lot of money. And yes, it is extractive. But I think this will change eventually. So currently, the data shard on Ethereum, the blobs are basically free because the blob gas limit or the blob limit has not been reached. So the auctioning off of the blobs have not yet started. So basically, 50% of the fees that Base will hopefully eventually pay is not actually being claimed by Ethereum right now. And I think that's a good thing and also a bad thing, sure, in the short term. But it's similar, I guess, to when a startup like signs up to AWS or Google Big Cloud, you know, they get all these credits for free just for building with their tools. And I think Ethereum is kind of doing the same thing at the moment with layer 2s, right? They want to get in more layer 2s to build onto Ethereum and expand on scale Ethereum. And I feel like once enough adoption happened through these layer 2s, and also once enough like activity in these layer 2s like starts to grow, I think then Ethereum can actually increase these prices for settling and really charge these layer 2s in a high degree. And I think so the question is more like, does Ethereum want to profit now while the space is so small? And I would say no, that's not a good strategy. Now is the time to scale, to bring in as many entities as possible, and then charge them later once they actually build on top of Ethereum and are much more sticky to Ethereum and will not just quickly leave Ethereum or build something else. So that is my opinion.
And just a quick follow. I think that's a good answer. I'm just curious, like, we're not charging now, but I guess once these auctions pick up and maybe once there's more activity and I guess blob saturation, how do we ultimately know what they will do when they're posed with the choice of, oh, I guess we have to pass on more fees to our users today? Like, that's an impossible kind of question to ask you in some ways, but I guess, is there other avenues they can go and not kind of pay the Ethereum tax or fee? Anything else that you're worried about when that kind of situation comes to a head?
So yeah, there are definitely, I guess that ties back into the modularity thesis. So rather than, for example, posting data blobs to Ethereum, you can also post them to Celestia or EigenDA. And doing that will certainly decrease the value accrual to ETH and ETH holders especially. And that's definitely a really validated concern. And I think the only way to really compete against the alternative DA solutions is to scale the DAs as quickly as possible to provide actually a better product, but also like additional security advantages for using Ethereum blobs versus other data availability solutions, in my opinion.
I'm sure you guys have like heard like different sides as well. Like, I'm not sure if it's helpful to spend too much time on like the traditional value accrual side of things, because then it often like brings us in a position where we are compared to other smart contract blockchains or smart contract platforms. So I feel like the store of value side of things, where like, hey, these L2s create demand for Ethereum, is what is like more interesting from my perspective. Of course, there are paths how we, like, I mean, Ethereum itself is selling two products, right? It's selling the execution itself and it's selling the blob space. And both products can be charged in the future, especially execution will go very well once we are 10K TPS, because then even at low fees, you can still make a ton of revenue basically, because you just have like a lot of transactions coming in, right? And the DA is more of like, still, this product is still kind of like, it's being shaped. Also, like the pricing mechanism is being shaped at the moment. Also with upcoming EIPs, this will still be like tinkered with a little bit. And let's see if it plays out, if like Ethereum will like accrue substantial amounts of money through DA. I don't know yet, but I'm sure that there are definitely paths towards it. But what I find more compelling is, yeah, demand for Ethereum creates demand for the asset ETH. Basically, if these layer 2s build on Ethereum, they pay gas fees in Ethereum, they use Ethereum, or like ETH, the asset, as unit of account on Ethereum. That will also help ETH, the asset, which in return will also help ETH, the L1, because the more the asset is worth, the higher is the security of the whole network in the end.
I was in jeopardy of taking us down a entirely mid-curve trajectory, and like we needed to address that because it needs to be talked about. But yeah, I think people look at Ethereum that it's totally static and never changing, and a lot of these economic levers are going to continue to change as well, and can be iterated upon and can be improved, and you can A/B test and be like, hey, this isn't working. Oh, this is working. Okay, let's do this. Like, that's the benefit of having an upgradable blockchain, right?
This episode is brought to you by Mantle, pioneering a revolutionary new category called blockchain for banking by bridging TradFi and Web3 into one unified stack. With on-chain transactions, TradFi rail compatibility, and integrated DeFi features, Mantle is reshaping how financial services work. Their flagship app UR lets users hold fiat and crypto all in one Swiss-backed account, making real-world finance usable on-chain. To learn more, go to ur.app and follow Mantle_official on Twitter. Spark, one of the leading DeFi protocols, has had a year like no other, deploying $2 billion into RWAs with BlackRock's Seidl and other institutional giants, adding over $1 billion in TVL, and distributing over $9 billion across the DeFi ecosystem. Now, Spark are setting their sights on further global expansion and have introduced the Spark token, which is available on leading centralized exchanges. There's never been a better time to discover Spark, the on-chain capital allocator. Learn more at spark.fi. One of the points you make in the report is around Celo, which was originally its own L1, migrating to become an Ethereum L2. I'm wondering, what are the takeaways from that? I've always wondered if that was a painful process behind the scenes and what went into that decision. I'm guessing it wasn't something that they took lightly. What are we to take away from that, and how does that set a path for others to potentially become L2s of Ethereum?
Yeah, I guess Celo isn't the only one at the moment already. We had multiple layer ones migrating to become layer twos. Lisk might be another example. Ronin, the big gaming chain, also just recently announced that they will become a layer two. So it's cool that to see now more and more chains follow that playbooks. It was very helpful, I think, for someone to start to set it off, so that other people can also better learn from this. And I think Celo is a great example because, as you mentioned, we also have a little case study in the report that what did Celo gain from moving from being a layer one to layer two is just mostly it's way cheaper for them. Operating a layer two is significantly cheaper than operating a layer one, where you have to pay validators, you have a lot of overhead to make sure that your chain is actually secure. But by becoming a layer two, Celo actually cut 99.8% of their security costs, because now instead of having to pay a set of 100 validators, I think it was 110 validators that they had in the end, which each got $59,000 per year for validating. They only have to pay for settlement to Ethereum L1, and in Celo's case, they use EigenDA for data availability, so they only have to these two costs, and it's just significantly cheaper. It ends up being a 99.8% cut in their costs, and bringing down the previous expenses of $6.9 million per year down to only $13,000 or $13,200 per year. This will go up, as we talked about before. This will go up over time once the Ethereum DA also becomes more costly, but it will most likely never be as high, at least with current transactions, will never be as high as before. It will always be a huge cost cut. So they're saving a bunch of money, they're saving a bunch of overhead because they don't have to worry about creating a decentralized system themselves. They can rely on Ethereum in that case. And I think it also opens up a broader design space, because if you don't have to worry about validation, you can do more on the execution side. You can be fast on the execution side, and you can also do other things on the execution side. And that's also how layer twos in the end make money. It's not necessarily about just a high amount of transactions, because what we see with most L2s is that most of the revenue is actually coming from priority fees now. So the average user will pay very little fees, but people that want to trade, that want to arbitrage something, or MEV, they are the ones that are actually paying. They are the ones that are keeping the chains alive, and that's the stuff that is worth something. And the spread is actually quite far. It's different for different chains, but average user will pay very, very little, while most of the execution is paid for by traders in the end.
One quick thing, I just want to reiterate something you said. I might have heard it wrong, but did you say like the layer 2 overhead costs are down to, did you say between $30,000 and $100 a year? Did I get that wrong?
Sorry, yeah. So before, Celo paid $6.9 million to their validators, and now they're paying $13,200, like $13,200 in costs, which is like, a 99.8% cost reduction. Yeah.
Unreal. And this is like, this kind of segues into this next thing I want to talk to you about, which is, every day this week that this week that we're taping this show, it seems like almost every day there's like a new L1 that's popping up. We had Circle announce, we had Stripe announce Tempo. We had already heard about Plasma. There's a ton of these again. So after all that you just said, what do you think is the reason that people are still opting to launch their own L1? Are you guys wrong? Are they wrong? Who's right? Who's wrong?
Yeah, I guess only time will tell in the end. I think it's very interesting for sure to see new L1s being launched. Also a little bit like, I don't know, feels a little 2018, but let's see what happens to it. Why would they launch an L1? Like, I can imagine different reasons, but I'm not sure in the end. I can think of like, okay, hey, these are businesses. They want to see how much can they actually build in-house. So that's why they go the L1 route and just to try to build the whole thing in-house first. But at some point, hopefully, maybe notice actually it's way easier if we outsource certain things like security to Ethereum mainnet. Honestly, in Circle's case, it's a little bit of like, maybe in general, it's like Circle or USDC. If it lives on layer 2s, it's not as safe of an asset as like people might think, because most of like USDC is actually natively minted on layer 2s, which means that you anyways cannot withdraw it to the L1, which then in case means that one of the main benefits of running a layer 2 or like being active on a layer 2 is like, worst case, if this L2 will go down or goes down for some reason, you can always withdraw your assets back to the L1. But that only works for assets that have been canonically bridged from the L1 to the L2. In Circle's case, or like with USDC, it's anyways not the case. So if this chain that Circle is going to launch is mostly used for payments in USDC, it won't even be able to make use of like one of the big benefits that layer 2s have to offer, right? But let's see if it plays out. I think personally they are cutting themselves off a little bit from like a big chance of like network effects, because if you're building within the Ethereum ecosystem, then maybe like other assets will spill into your ecosystem, other projects will spill over. But if you just run your own L1, it seems to be like very purpose built in Circle's case, so let's see. But they won't really be able to benefit from all of the network effects that are happening within the Ethereum ecosystem, in my opinion.
I think also if you study Coinbase Layer 2 base, I mean, it launched in 2024, right? It launched with the OP stack. Back then, the landscape was Arbitrum number 1, Optimism number 2. And there was like a long tail of layer 2s that had no meaning, really. And then you would have thought that these two layer 2s would dominate, right? But then comes along Base that has the same tech as Optimism and just overtakes it 10x within a year. And I think that shows us that just distribution matters so much. And I think these big corporations like Stripe and Circle, they have distribution. And I think just going the layer 1 route is like exposing them to a bunch of risk of like building a chain that takes a long time to develop, maybe creating some novel privacy thing, which could be really cool, but ultimately also bears a lot of risk if people would actually use it. And I think they are just holding themselves back. I think if they would just launch a layer 2, they could go to market within a month and start building what they actually want to build, rather than just spending years probably, designing their own chain and launching it probably when someone else overtook them already.
guys, I'm curious what you think are the most compelling use cases for Ethereum right now. Like, is it stable coins? Is it payments? Is it tokenized assets like stocks coming on chain? What do you think is the most meaningful piece of the pie to be capturing?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. Like, first of all, I think the most compelling use case of Ethereum is still like ETH, the asset in itself, because it's like just pristine internet money, right? Which like also offers you yield and can be used as collateral and like for many other things. It doesn't feel as real maybe as stable coins, but it becomes real once you actually like just hold it and once you use it for like your like to decentralize or like to not to decentralize to diversify your portfolio basically, right? And you will always have access to it. But other very interesting use cases, definitely stablecoins. We saw, I think, a lot of like talk about stablecoins in the past like months. I think it makes sense. I think people want to pay in like in currencies that they are used to, and I think we will definitely see more and more stablecoin adoption. Hopefully, also more stablecoin diversity along the way, like stablecoins that are also more, let's say, Ethereum aligned in the sense that not as easily censorable or also like canonically bridged to L2s, not natively minted on L2s, in order to also like have better properties that also show the ethos of the space that we're in. But yeah, I think tokenized stocks, tokenized real estate, all of these different like real world assets that are coming on chain, definitely super interesting stuff to explore. What I'm personally also excited about is topic of identity. It's a little less like finance heavy, but just like being able to use like CK proofs to identify yourself is also like a big thing, I think, which we will need in like the future and especially in the age of AI. So yeah, there's lots of cool use cases that you can build on blockchains that it just isn't possible on like a centralized ledger.
With some of the examples of use cases we just called out, each of these stable coins, payments, tokenized assets, or real world assets, there's a very obvious parallel to an offering or like a financial product in traditional finance. But I know we all get excited for net new primitives, DeFi native types of opportunities. So is anything else top of mind for you that has already been announced and is being built on Ethereum, or maybe a use case that you're personally excited to see built on Ethereum?
So we saw the Robinhood announcement that they want to tokenize US stocks. And I think that got everyone very excited. And I think it's very exciting, but ultimately what excites me even more is that they want to tokenize pre-IPO stocks. Because sure, the markets on the New York Stock Exchange, they work, right? We would just build something that's like better, but like a copy of that. I think what is really exciting is this new market we are opening up ourselves to. Pre-IPO stocks have never been this liquid, hopefully soon, or like through Zora creator coins, all of a sudden, content creators were able to monetize their content. And I think that opens up so much more, so many new markets we have never explored so far, which can really be bigger than we can ever imagine. So I think that's what really excites me about tokenization.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about our sponsor Gearbox, the protocol that reimagines on-chain lending. With Gearbox, you can access 10x credit across DeFi or lend for passive yields with single asset deposits and no impermanent loss. Users can access leverage to margin trade, stake, farm, and more. To learn more about Gearbox, go to gearbox.fi. Rumple Labs is revolutionizing DeFi. Rumple lets you turn points into profits by tokenizing rewards you can trade from top protocols like Pendle, Athena, Fluid, Symbiotic, and many others. No more waiting for airdrops or TGEs. DeFi's smartest investors are already using Rumple to unlock instant liquidity and maximize their yields. So join Rumple today and start spinning your points into gold. Learn more at rumple.xyz. Puffer Institutional delivers secure, high-yield Ethereum staking built for institutions. With battle-tested security, granular access controls, and the ability to boost APY by securing multiple AVSs, Puffer gives institutions full control and optimized returns. Puffer is also behind the Unify-based rollup, aiming to transform Ethereum's future in a world where all L2s are working together. To learn more, go to institutional.puffer.fi.
Guys, I want to pivot a bit to just Ethereum's roadmap. I think like even I get kind of confused on where we're going over the next, even year to 2 years. I hear words like surge, scourge, verge, and I think they're like a bit abstract. So maybe like walk us through, I kind of want you to tell us what Ethereum's actually going to look like for a user. And I'm talking about Ethereum L1, what it will look like for a user, and you can even pick your timeframes. I mean, like maybe over the rest of 2025, and then what does it look like into 2026? If one of you could do that for me, selfishly, that'd be great. Thanks.
So yeah, the other day I actually attended the 10-year anniversary party, and I met an OG Ethereum person who was kind of burnt out from how Ethereum looks nowadays. And he was telling me the story how in like the second week of when Ethereum was live, they managed to run a validator of Ethereum on their smartphone. And we are talking about 2015 tech. And back then, they were able to run a validator on a simple smartphone without any problems. And I think over the years, we kind of lost this cyberpunk vision of everyone being their own validator, securing the network. And that's where Ethereum is heading back to, with all of these different names that are kind of complicated to pronounce. The goal here is to basically make Ethereum lean. What does lean mean? Cut away all the unnecessary clutter and really narrow down what Ethereum is. And the goal here is to have Ethereum nodes run on your phone again, to not use RPCs, to validate and send transactions directly into the network from any device. And I think that's a beautiful vision. And Justin Drake, he really believes in that vision. And I think that's where Ethereum will be heading in the next 10 years.
I think that was a great answer. And like definitely that's a great bigger vision of Ethereum. Maybe just like very directly to like, okay, next 2 years. I mean, we have 2 big upgrades lined up so far. We have Fusaka, which will hopefully be shipped Q4 this year, maybe Q1 next year, which is like a bunch of different EIPs, but the headliner EIP will be increasing data availability with PIDAS, which means we will just have, again, way more blob space available for layer 2s, which is like a great breeding ground then for like more iteration, more experimentation and more scale. And then a little after that, looking at like towards the end of 2026, then we have Glamsterdam upgrade. It's still like in the planning what is going to be included there. But I'm sure we will see more scale for Ethereum L1 in there as well.
Guys, something I always see is I feel like maybe skeptics of Ethereum just like to kind of grade it and value it as like it's not ever going to change anymore. They almost look at it like it's a static thing that's not growing and innovating still. And maybe some of that's fair because I think there was some slowdown on that front, but I can tell everything's like been revitalized. So anyways, my point is there's this, vision for getting Ethereum L1 to 10K TPS. I'm curious, like, what that looks like. Is that still like, I think Justin Drake might have put out a roadmap a while ago, which I don't know if that was like a 5-year thing or what is maybe the timeline for that? And then I guess, what does that do? There's kind of 2 questions in one. What does that do for L2s and their scaling roadmap as well? Like, is that a threat to them? Is it needed to scale the L1 to that degree so L2s can flourish even more? So I guess ultimately it's like, when does this happen and what are the impacts on the current ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think we will actually reach that faster than everyone thinks. And I think the reason is that, first of all, there has been leadership change in the EF, and also especially Thomas, from the co-director of the EF. He is really pushing for every 6 months an upgrade. And while in the past it was more like, oh, devs, are you ready to do something? Nowadays it's, here's the deadline, this needs to get done. So I think there's much more pressure being built on delivering. And I think that's also a good thing because more will be shipped. So I see actually Ethereum scaling to 10,000 transactions per second latest, I think, in the next 5 years.
So yeah, like we will definitely see like Ethereum scale to way higher numbers. 10,000 TPS is great. At the same time, we will also see like layer 2 scale to way higher numbers. I think like we are aiming with like 1 million TPS here. So it's again like both have their merits. Like L1 will be used for like DeFi heavy, for high value transfers, whereas the L2s will be used for, who knows, gaming, maybe in the future. I saw people like on chains like Mega ETH like put like, okay, every single shot in a Counter-Strike game is like a transaction. Lots of stuff will be possible with layer 2s in the future. And that's the beautiful thing about Ethereum's like barbell strategy. Like we have very safe L1 on one side. It's a little slower, but it's okay. Like you can wait 12 seconds if you want to transfer, I don't know, 50K or like 1 million. And on the other side, we have the L2s, super scalable, super fast, like block times of maybe like 200 milliseconds, maybe even less in the future. And this way we can like tackle both, right? We can like have like a very safe environment, and we can also have like a very like highly scalable environment on the other side. And to your point, Lorenz, that like we will see more upgrades. I'm also very excited about seeing more upgrades. But in my very personal opinion, it's totally fine if it doesn't happen like every 6 months. Like rather take your time, like make sure everything's working correctly. If it's 9 months or even yearly, we don't have to be scared. I think that Ethereum itself is like too slow. I think it can definitely become faster with upgrades, but the most valuable thing to Ethereum is how, or especially Ethereum mainnet, is how reliable it is, and that it has like uptime 10 years straight. And we shouldn't do anything to like, damage that reputation. So let's be sure about upgrades. Let's still be like very like vigilant with every upgrade that we make. And that's also like how Ethereum will like win or keep winning in the future. And another point is, obviously we can like scale the protocol level, but there's also lots of innovation that can happen on like the app level, like stuff like account abstraction or whatever. Not everything has to be native on the protocol. You can also do a lot of like innovation on the app level. It needs also a lot of like, talking to all of these different teams, alignment, but it's also possible to get a lot of stuff done on the app level. But yeah, exciting times ahead for Ethereum.
Such great points. My final question then is Ethereum headed in the right direction? I think you both have called out some of the welcomed changes in the past 6 months, and then some of the risks to moving a little bit faster. But overall, what are your thoughts on, is Ethereum heading in the right direction?
I think 100%, yeah. I think we have to stay true to, or Ethereum has to stay true to its values, has to like keep its decentralization up, has to make sure that it stays reliable and trustworthy, and that's what we're doing. At the same time, we also keep scaling. So I think, yeah, I'm not worried about Ethereum in the short, mid, or long term. Honestly, I think we're like right on track with everything that has been like done in the past 10 years, and that is like on the horizon for the next 5 to 10 years.
I agree. We are heading in the right direction. We are basically flying an airplane, exchanging the engine, and we have proven that it works. And I think, no other blockchain has really done anything like that. So it just takes time, but we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, such a good analogy. I've heard people talk about it's like being on a plane, and yeah, you're trying to switch out the engine like in midair. Or you've jumped out with a parachute and you're trying to figure out the parachute. before he hit the ground. But long story short, it's been remarkable that all of these upgrades have taken place and that the network has continued to process blocks, like just a remarkable sort of accomplishment. And I never took it lightly, the track record of being live for 10 years, but once we hit that 10-year mark, I was actually in New York at the NASDAQ, part of a Ethereum 10-year anniversary with Joe Lubin and some other colleagues I used to work with at Consensus. It was just wonderful, and it was really a wonderful time to reflect on how wild is it that this is working. That was actually the main talking point a lot of us were throwing back and forth, was just I can't believe this is all working. There was a real risk of this not working, 5-10 years ago, obviously, but so proud of what's been accomplished, and that is a community effort. So anyways, I think this is a great place for us to wrap up then. So first, I want to remind our listeners they can learn more about Grow the Pie by going to growthepie.com. That's where they can find Building the World Ledger report. So just go there, and we'll put it into the show notes as well. You can follow growthepie_ETH on X. Follow Web3_data on X. That's Matze's personal account. And then follow Lehmann Lorenz. It's LEHMANN Lorenz, LORENZ. And again, we'll put that in the show notes so you can find that. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for walking us through some of the takeaways from the report. And thanks for what you do. I think Grow the Pie is clearly an important tool. It's part of what makes Ethereum such a powerful world ledger, because everything is transparent, and it's tools like yours that really bring that to life and allow us to understand what's going on economically at any point in time. But guys, any final word here before we go?
Thanks for having us. To all your listeners, read the report, send us some feedback. We're happy about any feedback on the report. Check out Grow the Pie, especially if you're building an Ethereum ecosystem. Take a look at the different tools that we have. Hopefully lots of cool stuff for you that's useful. But yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. To stay up to date with future episodes, plus get expert tips, strategies, and exclusive content, subscribe to our free newsletter at the-edge.xyz.